Oh yeah, I actually wrote mine down. Make sure I hit every single point there. My name is Michael Cargill. I'm the owner of Central Texas Gun Works. And if you've read anything about me, one of the first things they say, the first sentence is, "Oh yeah, that's the black gay gun store owner."
Yeah!
More of an outcast now.
143 years ago, the people of Texas lost the right to lawfully carry a handgun in public. For most Texans, this was a right they'd previously taken for granted. For black Texans, this was a hard-won, newfound freedom. Following the Civil War, the southern states struggled to rectify their traditional way of life with the presence of newly freed slaves. The states that weren't as progressive as Texas responded by implementing so-called black codes, laws intended to maintain the slave-era social status of blacks. Now, chief among these black codes were prohibitions against the owning of firearms by freed slaves. Many states even got help in enforcing these prohibitions. Now, from a newly formed civic organization known as the Ku Klux Klan. Now, the Klan, in its efforts to locate illegally held weapons, organized nighttime raids on black settlements. Now, of course, here in Texas, the politicians were a bit more forward-thinking. Now, sure, the governor did organize a few disarmament raids on black settlements, but rather than create a law banning blacks from owning firearms, the legislature simply created a law prohibiting anyone from carrying a firearm on property of another without permission. Now, lawmakers seemed pretty happy with this compromise until a few years later when the Texas Attorney General expressed concern that these blatant attempts to disarm free blacks, most of whom still lived and worked on plantations, probably didn't comply with the equal protection clause of the soon-to-be ratified 14th Amendment, now to the United States Constitution. Now, he cautioned that maintaining this law might prevent Texas from being readmitted to the Union, and the Texas Constitution Convention concurred and repealed the law prior to the ratification of the 14th Amendment. Now, in the 2 years following the Texas readmittance to the Union, the state legislature passed back-to-back gun control laws, the first redistricting and the second prohibiting the carrying of handguns. Now, later, the prohibition stood virtually unchanged for 125 years until concealed carry became legal in 1996. Amazingly, here in gun-friendly Texas, open carry is still prohibited. Almost a century and a half later, Texans still live under a rationally motivated law that was applied to all only because the U.S. Constitution wouldn't allow it to be applied to just some. Now, the Lone Star State now ignores the precedent set by the 44 states that currently allow open carry and instead follows the lead of such un-gun-friendly states as New York, Illinois, California. Now, the reality is that gun control in this country started with the end of slavery because people were terrified by the ideal of a gun being carried by someone who was different from them. Gun control was expanded during the Civil Rights Movement because, again, people were terrified by the idea of gun being carried by someone who was different from them. Now, and today, as I hear epithets such as gun nut and redneck bandied about by our opponents, I realize that people still support gun control. And these measures because they are still terrified by the idea of a gun being carried by anyone who is different from them. It is time to do away with unjust, unreasonable laws rooted in bigotry and hatred.
Yeah.
It is time for the Texas legislature to legalize open carry and uphold the Constitution of this great nation. I'm Michael Cargill, and to anyone who would try to disarm this free man, I say, come and take it.